The problem is you do see a lot of antisocial people succeed. Loneliness is as big a risk factor for ill health and death.
We live inside our heads.
You go cold turkey, you go into withdrawal.
There is a lot of value in the stuff that we struggle with.
Better Thinking. Conversations with experts exploring all things psychology. Welcome back to Better Thinking. My name is Nesh Nikolic, and my guest today is Kim Delbaere, talking about promoting healthy aging and understanding physical, psychological, and cognitive factors causing falls in the older population. Kim is a senior principal research scientist at Neuroscience Research Australia and Director of Innovation and Translation at the Falls, Balance and Injury Research Centre, and also Professor at University of New South Wales, Sydney. She graduated in 2001 as a Master in Rehabilitation Sciences and Physiotherapy at the Ghent University in Belgium and completed her PhD in 2005 on falls in older people. In 2006, she moved to Australia to work at Neuroscience Research Australia on fear of falling in older persons. Kim's research has contributed to the understanding of physical, psychological, and cognitive factors causing falls. Her multidisciplinary approach incorporates elements from physiotherapy, psychology, brain imaging, and software engineering toward preventing falls and promoting healthy aging. Kim has been successful at developing novel methods of applying technology to healthy aging over 10 years now in both healthy older people and a range of chronic diseases. Her contributions to medical research have been recognised through 2 prestigious NHMRC Excellence Awards and numerous successful NHMRC applications. It was a great pleasure talking to Kim, learning about the importance of preventing falls, particularly in older persons, and how balance can easily be improved with specific exercises. This is such a fascinating topic in that it's going to be important to all of us one day, and from what I've learned, is already a factor for many of us, whether we know it or not. So enjoy this. I think it's going to be relevant at some stage and is something that I think should be promoted in a wider conversation in our population, in our community, as it's got really important ramifications for all of us. Enjoy. Kim, a big thank you for coming onto the program today. I'm so excited to talk to you about healthy aging, in particular with my parents being now in that age. And also, I know a little bit of a passion of yours is looking at contributing factors, whether it be psychological, physical, cognitive capacity that contributes to falling. So welcome to the show.
Oh, thank you for having me, Nesh. It's a delight.
I always have to ask my guests, how did you fall into this line of work? And in particular for you, it's such a niche and an interesting space. So how did that come about?
Well, I'm an only child, but my grandma actually had lots of sisters as well. And I spent quite a lot of time with my grandma and my great aunties. And so I always had a love for aging, I guess, from there, and just also saw how important it was for them to stay engaged socially, physically, and cognitively. So I think that's kind of how that started as well. Yeah.
So you had quite a lot of for lack of a better word, senior, not only role models, but carers, people that were looking after you, and that kind of village scenario that raises a child.
Yeah, but that's right. Like, I know, just like all the way from when I was a child, like I would spend my holidays there. But then as I became a teenager, I would just take my bicycle, or when I started driving, I would take my car out to visit my grandma, my great aunties. And one of them lived in Spain. So that actually got me to travel a bit to Spain quite early on when I was still quite little. So yeah, and I think it kind of went a bit both ways, especially as I got older, we just had a really lovely connection. Yeah. Yeah.
It's interesting thinking about aging in different countries, different cultures. I know for myself with a Serbian heritage, being able to see how older persons are looked after in the community back in Serbia, and how there are differences here in Australia, and also differences in how, you know, I might say migrants, but it's not true because it's not all migrants. Maybe some of the community members of the Serbian community that I've observed, how we approach looking after the elders in our community. What have you seen as been your experience, and both personally and in your research?
Yeah, it's such an important point, Nesh. Like in many communities and in our own communities a few years ago, like we actually took care of our older people. Like it was a status that you reached as you were older. You were very well respected, and so families took care of each other, and grandparents would take care of the grandchildren, and it would just kind of all happen naturally. But in our current society, it's a lot harder. People are very busy. There's other commitments related to work, and people don't live close to each other anymore. And I'm actually a classic example. I moved to the other side of the world. I'm originally from Belgium, and now I live in Sydney, and I'm an only child, as I mentioned. So it's and if as you age, like I always like to say, if we're lucky enough to age, we will need help at one point. Like there's no one who ages like all the way to their 90s and never needs help, and just kind of then. Well, it does happen occasionally, I guess, that you just then kind of then pass away in your sleep, and that's it. But most people are not lucky in that way, and they do become dependent in one way or another. If that might be because of a disease like Parkinson's or dementia, but also it can be because of a fall, which is my passion. And lots of like we all always talk about those big diseases like dementia, which no one wants to get. Like we're all worried about this. Like it's not something you wish on anyone. But falls is actually something that can happen to you, younger. And it actually is more common, so it's more likely to happen to you. And we've had a few very famous falls quite recently. Like Maggie Beer had a fall, Dawn Fraser had a fall, Nancy Pelosi had a fall just the other day as well. So it's falls don't discriminate. And it is actually, it can result in injury that is life-changing. About 10% of falls end up in an injury that are likely to be life-changing. And as you get older, it's just very hard to recover from injury. So things have changed over time. Yeah.
Yeah. I heard somewhere that falls, and I don't know what the actual statistic is, but I remember being quite surprised by it, that falls that result in a hip breakage or fracture are really strongly correlated to passing away within a certain time frame, that it's a real traumatic fall for an older person. I can't remember at what stage of age that was, but it was quite predictive of passing away, within X amount of years. And I don't know if that's even relevant, whether it's a true statement. Obviously, I haven't given much detail, but I remember going, "Wow, that's fascinating." If it's true,
yeah. No, falls is actually the reason, like the most common reason for an accident that leads older people to pass away. And actually, if you've been injured, and that doesn't have to be a hip fracture, like hip fracture is actually very serious. Like it's serious at all ages, but it becomes like very serious as you get older. Like Barry Humphries, he actually passed away because of the consequences of a hip fracture after a fall. But another thing, like if other injuries. Like if you've been hospitalized because of an injury after a fall, you're twice as likely to end up in a nursing home. So, and that's actually more common than something like dementia. And we don't think about it. Yeah,
It's
it's a
something I have.
serious issue.
Yeah, I know I've observed my parents both now in their early 70s, and I've certainly noticed their balance has quite, at least it appears for me, declined rapidly. And it might be that it's been ongoing, but it's harder for them to compensate. They're less steady on their feet, their confidence is lower. And to see my father, and for the first time in his life, ask his son to say, can you come over and maybe get up on the roof, or help me cut this tree down that's a little bit awkward, or do some high hedges.
Yeah.
That's not something that most of us are familiar with. We, as young people, you look at your parents and they are almighty. They are
Yeah.
so strong. They will never age, of course. But as you say, they're very fortunate to be in old age, and we've got to be appreciative of that. But I've certainly seen their balance shift quite a lot.
Yeah. And, it's great that your dad is actually asking for help, because sometimes dads don't. And then they get into a risky situation, which could lead to a different type of fall from a ladder, which would be more serious,
Yeah.
but can also be a result of bad balance. But our balance actually starts to deteriorate like from the age of 40. So that means that includes me, you know. And so I've started doing my balance exercises as well. Better make sure that I do it. But it is something, it kind of goes unnoticed for a long time. Like you just get away with it. You don't really notice that your balance is deteriorating. But then it seems like when you kind of reach that age of 65, that's when the risk of falls because of that balance actually starts to really increase. And then, so we say that, or the stats show that about 1 in 3 people aged over the age of 65 will fall at least once a year. Half of them will fall again in that same year. And if we look at the older age group, 85 and over, half of them will fall once a year. And again, like half of them will fall again. So it's a very common issue. But the good thing about it is, and that's something that I always really like to stress, is that it doesn't have to be a normal part of aging. Like it seems to be something like, oh, well, yes, as we get older, we fall. But it doesn't have to be like, and considering like the severity of the consequences of a fall, like you actually really want to avoid it if you can. Like it can be very like life changing, as I said. But we can practice our balance, from the age of 40, but actually right up until you're 100. And if you're lucky enough to get it to 120, like you can keep practicing your balance. Like your balance challenges kind of change as you age, and as if you're a bit more frail, maybe the best balance exercise that you can do is taking putting one foot in front of the other and walking along your kitchen bench. And for you, it might be like standing on one leg and trying to do that with your eyes closed. Like we can practice our balance in many, many different ways. And, like take a class like Tai Chi, for example, is very good for our balance. So it's something that we can absolutely practice. Like there is no time that we can't practice it anymore.
Before I ask you more questions around the practice and other ways we can improve on that, what are the factors that contribute to starting to lose our balance, or I suppose a deterioration of balance from age 40 onwards? I certainly, I've very, very recently started to try and lift up some weights, and I can just see even the way I hold weights, I'm quite clumsy. I'm not really holding them with stability. I'm, yeah, clumsy is the right word. That's what it feels like.
Yeah.
And I can kind of see that my age is probably in play, or they haven't potentially exercised the muscles to have that, stabilizers holding a weight in a unusual way. But what are the contributors, and why at age 40?
Yeah, well, it's like the age 40, it's just like they've kind of done like trends
Sure.
and things like that. So that's kind of when it starts to bend for some people. But
Yeah.
balance is actually it's a complex thing. But it's, if you think about it, like our balance relies on so many factors. So if you practice it like after our podcast, but if you stand on one leg, that might be all right. Yeah, you're probably okay to do that, but then try and close your eyes and see how that goes. Like, we need our vision to be able to balance. Like, you actually rely on your vision constantly, and then we also rely on how our feet kind of feel the floor as well. Like, if you then would try, I'm going to make it really challenging. Stand in the middle of your bed like a very wobbly surface with your eyes closed on one leg. Very tricky. I think you'll fall softly, but it would be very hard to do. But like, you can see that there's lots of things that we actually need for our balance to kind of be perfect. Our inner ear as well, like the vestibular system is very important for our balance, and all those things, like, they kind of age. Vision, like, we need glasses, our inner ear changes as well. And our joints also age. Like, many people actually might need a knee replacement at some point, or a hip replacement, but we actually need our joints. Like, there's also sensors kind of in our joints that help us with our balance. And then all that information, like from our within our bodies and also our environment, things that we see, things that we hear, that all has to get processed in a snap amount of time by our brain to actually be able to keep balance. And it becomes really tricky when you're starting. When you walk around in an environment that might be challenging. So what we can see a bit more often these days is that young people are using their phone. Like, I'm actually using it as well, I guess, like sometimes when I'm walking, but that's when you're dual tasking. So you're actually doing two things at once, which is challenging your brain. So it's focusing on what you're texting. And most people will actually slow down, like young people as well. Like, as you are walking and you're texting, they won't walk at the same pace, which is good because you might run into something. But it's more than that. Like, you actually have to start, your brain has to start prioritizing. All right, what's more important here? I better not fall. It's embarrassing, or I might hurt myself. Just slow down. So that I can still do this texting. But as we get older, like, those challenges become a bit more like more common, I guess. Like, an older person will not be texting because that is actually too taxing. But then as we, how often has it been that you walk along the street and all of a sudden there's this something going on, or there's a car that's not happy about something, and you kind of get a little startled, or you wonder what's going on. That has nothing to do with your walking, but it can be enough to kind of trip someone up because it's distracting, and it kind of takes priority in their brain somehow over the walking, and then they might trip up. Or even something simple like, oh, I'm off to the shops and I forgot to check if we still have milk in the fridge. I don't want to go back. And they think about that, and then they've just missed seeing this little trip hazard on the road. So, and those kind of things, that's how we know the brain is actually super important for balance. And that's how we learned that walking is not automated. So we need to use our brain to walk. And that's kind of how balance and your risk of falling is actually dependent on your physical factors, like muscle strength, that's one factor. But your balance actually needs a lot more than just your muscles. Like, it needs so much more. It needs your physical body. and it needs your brain. And there's actually also some indication that psychological factors, and that kind of really makes it a holistic problem, can cause falls as well, or can cause your balance to deteriorate or to be poorer. I'm personally very interested in concerns about falling, but we've also looked at this in relation to depression. So depression is actually quite common. It becomes a bit more common in old age as well for various reasons. And we have seen that depressive symptoms, so that doesn't have to be a major depressive disorder, but can lead to falls as well. So if people would take medications for it, the medication might increase their risk of falling because of pharmacological reasons. But if the person doesn't take medication, but they have depressive symptoms, that might also increase their risk of falling. And there are some theories around that, but one of the theories is that it's really just it's a whole body kind of experience that is not good, and that could actually result to falls risk.
It's so fascinating to think about how many factors go in, whether it's, vision or, the stability of your feet or the surface of the floor, those very physical things, your inner ear, your joints, your muscles, and how formed they are, whether there's degradation or atrophy, or whether they're well used and they've got strength. Cognitive load, one's attention, the psych factors, and I think depression is probably a classic one to look at. I'm assuming because of that motor retardation aspect, but also in terms of attention and focus and the like. There's so many items that go in, which I suppose means that not only does it affect everyone across a lifespan, and many of us fall throughout our lives, but some of these are compounding as people get older. So that more of these factors are in play as we age. Are there more frequent times that people are likely to fall? Is there research around that outside of just age? Is it certain situations, scenarios? What's the research say, or what is there anything that you can speak to around that?
Yeah. Well, there's not like a really clear kind of trend. Like it's an accident essentially that can happen. But what we do know is that it is actually more likely for a person to have a fall in their own home. So in a situation like where they're very familiar situation. So it's actually more likely to have a fall there than out in the open where you might feel less familiar. So and there are like things in relation to that you could do to kind of prevent a fall, like making sure that there's no trip hazards in your home. But then there's another thing as well. There's just different risk factors, I guess, that can lead to falls, and that can kind of help us understand a little bit when falls happen. There's one research study that happened where they said they actually had the idea of replacing glasses of people. So just making sure that their prescription glasses were totally up to date, because vision is an important factor. And that's when they discovered that actually multifocal glasses, can actually expose a person's risk of falling, because, if you've got this little, like, it becomes a blurred part of your vision as you go outside walking if you're wearing multifocals. So then the advice came out that if you do go for a walk outside, that you should be wearing single focus glasses. So that doesn't happen. And then, having up-to-date prescription glasses is a good thing. Like there's little things like that. People who suffer from incontinence, which is also something that happens a bit more as we get older, or people often also have to go to the bathroom a little bit more often during the night as well. Then that can be a time when a fall can happen as well, because it's dark and there might not be a little nightlight in the hallway. And that could then also be a situation where you can, it's a normal situation where you can be at risk because you can't rely on your vision because it's dark. But there's so many different situations, and there is no clear, if you avoid that time of day, the nation is fine. It doesn't work like that, sadly.
But it is fascinating to think about something as simple as having bifocal versus single focal. It makes so much sense once you point it out, but
Yeah.
think of that, and unless that research, comes about and kind of says, hey, we're seeing a little bit of a pattern here.
Yeah.
What's occurring, and vision being such a large factor, it makes a lot of sense. As you say,
Yeah.
some of the exercise of closing your eyes helps.
Yep, absolutely.
What are more of those exercise strategies that are available? You mentioned Tai Chi, you mentioned standing, going toe to heel, stepping forward, obviously with some supports to make sure that in case, standing on one leg, or a more advanced might be standing on one leg with your eyes closed. Can you tell me maybe some of the exercises, but also what are they targeting, to give me a better appreciation of why we might pick one over another?
Yeah.
I'm just thinking about my parents at the moment, just going, how am
Yeah.
I going to apply some of this?
I'll give you some tips. Well, so the research is actually very clear, and it's, like, if you think about all the different public health problems that we have, like, related to aging as well, falls is actually one that has the strongest evidence. Like, we really know how to prevent falls. We can't prevent all falls, but we can prevent many, like up to 30% we can prevent of falls. And what we know, the single most effective strategy, the single most important thing that people should think about doing is to challenge their balance. So we typically start at the age of 65. So that will be the recommendation that I'll be sharing. This is a recommendation that has been endorsed by the World Health Organization and, many other kind of big organizations. And what we say is the single most effective strategy is to practice your balance for 2 hours a week. So challenging balance exercises for at least 6 months. So in that 6-month period, you will start feeling that your balance improves, your confidence improves, like you just kind of feel a little bit more kind of strong on your feet. But it takes about 6 months to actually have that impact on reducing your risk of falling. Of course, just like with any exercise, if you stop that, then, there's a huge chance, like probably 100% guarantee, that all the benefits that you have reached in those 6 months will kind of slowly go away.
Sure.
So essentially what we're saying is that it's important to just keep up these balance exercises and to make sure that they're part of your routine, really. And like, but you also asked about the type of exercises, and of course it's very different for different people. Like, it all depends on, your physical capacity as well, and how good, your starting point, essentially. But like, you can design balance exercises to be challenging just for about anyone. Like, if you think about gymnasts, that you can still challenge their balance as well if you make the exercise hard enough. So, like, there's a huge range of different strategies that we can do. Not saying that we all have to stand on a beam, and do like cartwheels. That's not necessary. But you can see that there's no limit to kind of challenging our balance in that way. But it is important to do it in the right way as well. So a challenging balance exercise shouldn't be too challenging in a way that you're like, well, I just can't do that. Then you won't get the benefit. And there's multiple ways of how to do that. Like there's group classes out there that offer this. You can also talk to an exercise professional, like a physiotherapist or an exercise physiologist. There's even fitness leaders now that are getting an extra kind of course for aging exercises, age-related kind of improvement exercises. So, there's multiple people out there that you can ask for help. So you can check with your GP as well. So there's specific falls exercise programs out there, like we've got Stepping On in New South Wales. But there's also Tai Chi, for example, that actually has been proven as a good style of group classes or exercise style that you can do to prevent falls. There's been some trials around yoga as well, which are a bit less conclusive, but like those kind of exercises that you can challenge your balance, those styles are very much also something that you can use. It also depends on what your preference is as well. Not everyone likes to go out and practice their balance in a group. We often get like we've done a lot of work on this in our research as well, where we try to understand kind of what people's barriers are, I guess, in relation to going out and doing their exercises. And it can be so varied. Like we would sometimes hear like a male perspective would be like, I'd like to do it, but actually I'm the only guy there. And it's only women going to these classes, and I just don't feel quite comfortable with it. So, and there is no kind of other class in the area, so I just stopped going. Then a female perspective that we've heard is that people would say, I just don't know what to wear. Like I never wear gym clothes. Like my clothes are just not suitable for that. And I don't feel comfortable wearing gym clothes. Like you can think they're superficial, but they actually really matter. So that's kind of how, like we very much recommend like making sure there's a social component to classes, because it kind of helps as well to make sure that you keep up with it. But we're also offering home-based classes, home-based exercises as well. And the idea there is that we can help people to kind of build their confidence in the comfort of their own home, to then, do other things, which might be golf, which is not like, it's a bit of practicing of your balance if you stretch it, maybe, but something that they might enjoy more and actually might get a better swing out of it, if their balance is better. And that's kind of how, like within our research, we actually started focusing a little bit more on those home-based programs. So just making sure that people actually know what to do, so that we can actually empower people in understanding, what they need to do and actually deliver their exercises at home in a way that is easy to do and will have that same benefit.
And when you say practicing 2 hours a week where you're in, I suppose, an environment of challenging your balance, can you talk a little bit about what that means to be challenging it? I can certainly see how, for example, yoga might challenge it in certain positions where you need to be able to, let's say, somewhat squat forward while you're maintaining your balance with your arms out. Or, Tai Chi, most certainly, in a similar reasoning. And, you could challenge that further by more difficult poses or actions and having your eyes closed. But it's constantly asking you to hold a balance. Can you talk about what challenging means? Is walking potentially provide that? Is it about terrain that you might use? Would gardening potentially do that for some older persons? I assume something like dance would most definitely, because I find it difficult to dance myself at any given age. But are there daily activities that we would potentially be able to say by engaging in those, they naturally have balance attached to them that could be part of that 2 hour guideline, so to speak?
Yeah. Well, it's a very good question, and it's a question that researchers have had as well, hoping to be able to answer that positively. But yeah, you'll probably guess it a little bit already. So there have been trials that actually looked at dancing as a full risk strategy. It kind of makes sense. Like I thought it would work, but it didn't.
Maybe people are falling over more during dance.
Maybe.
But it
But it
doesn't.
kind
It
of
doesn't have an effect.
no, it doesn't have an effect. It just doesn't challenge your balance enough. And it's the same with walking. It doesn't actually challenge your balance. And there was a walking trial that was done for fall prevention, and it increased falls. Um, and it's actually not too hard to kind of, if you think it through, why that could have been. But if you start asking people to go out for walks, but they don't have the balance to kind of back themselves up, you actually expose them to risk. So while walking, I will never say walking is not good exercise. Like it's very important to go out for walking, like it's important for many other things. But it's actually more important to practice your balance, making sure that your balance is good enough so that you can actually go out for those walks. So, that if your balance is not good enough, it might actually be a better strategy to just kind of focus for a few weeks on that balance, because you can actually improve your balance. Like within about 2 months, you really will start feeling that difference, and then start going out for walks that are a bit longer and a bit more challenging. Sadly, there is no clear kind of easy one that is out there that you might say, well, I really enjoy this, so I'll be all right. It's really about challenging that balance, but you can do it in between things. Like, 2 hours does sound like a lot, but one of the beautiful things of balance exercise is it's very different to like training your cardio, for example. If you wanna have like a better cardio, it's important to, for example, if you think about you want to start going for runs, if you would just go for a run like for 2 minutes and then like you go back to your computer and you do another 2 minutes, the chances that you'll be able to run a half marathon in a few months' time is probably slim. But like, so you kind of actually need to kind of make it longer and longer. With balance, it's different. Like you can absolutely have snacks of exercise all the way through your day, where you have like, you've got the kettle boiling for your cup of tea. That takes a little bit of time. So how about you just try standing on one leg for that time? Initially you might have to kind of put your foot down in like before the kettle is fully finished. But as you practice it every day, like before you know it, you'll actually be able to do it for that entire time, and then you kind of feel very proud of yourself. Yeah.
So really requires very much a practice. This is not something that happens because you're doing a particular activity, other than some exceptions, for example, Tai Chi, where balance is actually being challenged the entire time. Or at least, substantially enough to have those benefits. But exercises like standing on one leg, making things more difficult by, closing your eyes, walking, toe to heel. I imagine making that more difficult with closing your eyes as well. Potentially, holding one arm out while the other one stays in. Or, there's probably lots of different ways. Obviously, your the grounding is important as to, is it flat, is it moving, so on and so forth. You could do that forever.
Yeah,
A high wire rope obviously might be the
that's right.
extension
Practice your balance whilst
of that.
being on the bus.
Yeah, but yeah. So anything, but it's really saying what I'm doing right now is just trying to balance, whether it's um, potentially on 2 feet if you're on the bus, because you would need to be on 1 foot at that point, all the way to being on 1 foot, and being actively challenged. So the idea is to challenge it. It's a practice, accumulate 2 hours over time. At least
Per
that's
week.
the kind of guideline, and I'm assuming there's some. Obviously, we're not encouraging people to do less, but we're not wanting to encourage people that's the only amount, and anything lower than that is not helpful. If someone was only able to do 15 minutes a week, 15 is better than nothing, and obviously
Absolutely.
30 is better again, and so on and so forth.
Yeah, absolutely. It's any practice of balance is better than nothing. And like that is actually the message that we would like to give to people, that just try and fit it in. Be conscious that it is actually something that should be part of your routine, and think of ways of how you can make that a bit easier to think about it. And that can be because you kind of attend a class, and that then gives you a time when you will go to do that practicing of your balance, or you fit it into your routine at home in some way or form. So there's many ways of how we can do it, and it is really just realizing that it is something that we should start thinking about from the age of 65, but maybe a little bit earlier as well.
I wonder if there's an element, and it's just come to me. I'd love to hear your thoughts on it. I wonder whether there's an element of balance coming from trying to be stationary and holding your balance, rather than, if it moves into something like gardening or something like dance, it's a different type of balance that might be related to falls, that's more strengthened by stationary balance activities rather than moving balance activities. I'm not sure. Maybe that could be broken down in terms of examples that aren't quite that. But is there a relationship there that's more stationary practices,
Not really.
as in
It's
holding your
like,
balance, or oh, I suppose it's not, because even you saying the heel to toe, that's a moving
yeah.
balance thing, but it's certainly slower.
Yeah, it's really about challenging the balance,
Challenging.
and like absolutely you can challenge your balance while doing walking style exercises as well, and you should, because one of the things actually that is very important is um to practice actually taking a step backwards, because and taking a step sideways as well, like,
Okay.
which is actually a moving style exercise, because, and I've actually seen my mum do this, and it's a few years ago, where she was playing with one of my children who was still very young at that age, and she was playing, like, catching the ball, and so the ball kind of came a bit too far backwards. Children are very good at
Sure.
throwing the ball. And she was catching it, but I actually saw her not taking that backward step. Like, and I
Oh,
was like,
wow.
oh, and I was too far away to kind of catch her. It was all fine, but like I could see how her response was all about catching that ball and actually not taking that step backwards. Like, and it's things like that. That's why actually when I realized, oh dear, mum needs to do her balance exercises.
I've
And
seen
that's
that.
when I
I've
developed
seen
an
that as
app to make
well.
sure she did them.
Yeah, I've seen that as well, and I suppose in many ways, I've always thought about that's their physical um, decay, degradation, slowing down. But in actual fact, it's also about cognitive load. That the ball's coming to them, they're trying to anticipate catching, and the projection of the ball, how it's going to be, how they're going to catch it. And so there's no signal going to their legs to say, take a step back or to the side, and easier to catch your foot on something as well. There's so many complete, and obviously your vision, if you're looking at the ball, you're probably not looking at the horizon as much. So many different things. There's an urgency about it. Wow. I can actually see even now that we're talking about it, catching and throwing a ball could challenge someone's balance. You just make it more and more difficult as you go, depending on the person's ability.
That is actually a great exercise. Like you could actually, do this by yourself if you throw it against a wall. But it is a little bit more risky though, so I wouldn't recommend it like necessarily for an older person. But that being able to kind of then take a step out to catch the ball, or that kind of thing, like it's that reactive kind of balance is also very important to practice, because we don't often practice it. Like it's just something that you occasionally need. And when you need it, you actually really need it because it's to stop you from falling. So that kind of thing, that's also very good to embed into your routine. And it's the more challenging that balance exercise is, actually the more likely you're better off doing that together with someone else. But like there's lots of kind of more safe balance exercises, like, and the ones that I'll be recommending here, because that's the ones that people might be trying out by themselves, are the ones where they can actually have, which they should, have a kitchen bench, for example, right next to, or a very stable chair, so that they can actually hold on to it or rely on that support if they do lose their balance. But that's kind of what a challenging balance exercise is, that you actually need to have support next to you, so that you actually might need it. And if you don't need it, it's great, your balance is improving, but you kind of like, it needs to be at that point that you can do a little bit of it, but you might actually have to touch sometimes. And that's when you've got it right. That's when your balance exercise is challenging enough for you.
That's a really great point. The level of challenge actually has to be quite high. You're not actually maintaining your balance with a lot of these activities that are stretching your balance. You're actually trying to get to a point where you just can't. It's safe enough, but you just can't. You got to kind of continue to increase the activity or the safety level depending on how far you're pushing yourself.
That's right.
Otherwise,
and that's kind of and that's kind of where an exercise professional might be very important. Like it depends also on the person, how safe they feel doing these exercises by themselves. It might be something that you say, I'd rather start off with someone else, like to actually teach me, and then I'll move into doing this by myself, as well. But like there will be a little bit of both as well. Like to actually do 2 hours a week indefinitely together with a person, like, if you're wealthy enough, you might be able to afford it. But it's not usual. So there will be kind of times where you just really have to kind of practice that by yourself, but you totally can. Yeah.
But I can certainly also see where the need for it to be so individualized, because you might have someone who has very, very weak upper body strength, and how to stabilize themselves is much harder, and therefore what activities they choose has to be dependent, so that safety is there, because an arm rail might be useful for one person, but someone might need two, for example, so they have to kind of face chair, so they got two hands on it rather than one hand on it, should the need to stabilize be required. I can see that sort of scenario where it could be just stand with 2 feet, close your eyes for a moment, and have a chair in front of you to make sure that how long can you do that before you need to grab that chair. maybe have something behind you as well, just in case you get a prompt for it's
Yeah.
something touching your bottom to
Yeah, that's
remind you
right.
that you've tipped a little bit, So
And
much
even
about
before
depending on the person.
closing your eyes, because that can be really tricky.
Yeah,
Like
that's
if
a big
like the
one.
person you're describing can be quite frail. So then what I would rather do is to kind of change, if you're able to stand on both feet, and do that well with your eyes open, then change your foot position to something like this,
Oh,
like,
yeah.
or a
Yeah,
bit
the further
wider
you go
even.
apart, the harder it is. Yeah.
Yeah.
Or it could be even
And
on
then
your
when you
tippy
can do
toes.
that, do this, then you can do that. And then it just
Yeah.
all, and then after that, if you do that well, then maybe practice with your eyes closed after that, but not in this position, but in the easy one. Yeah.
Yeah.
So,
Yeah.
and there's lots of different ways. Like I, we've done this. Like we've developed exercise programs specifically on balance, but we can come up with thousands of exercises. Like there's absolutely no problem. Like you can challenge the balance, like all the way from a frail person who spends most of their time seated and is using a walking aid to get about, to the fit golfer who actually needs a little bit of practice of their balance to improve their swing.
Yeah, yeah.
Yeah.
I could even see like slow walking, that the time in which you take a pace or take a step, the slower you walk, obviously the longer you have to actually maintain that balance, and depending on the person, frailty and so on. But
Yeah,
the variation actually becomes infinite. You
it
can
does.
you can you know
Yeah.
run it in so many different ways. Um, wow, wow. I'm going to be racing home after this and saying, yeah, I spoke to this very interesting lady. She said you got to look after our kids for a while and throw balls around. Or you,
Sure.
mum, 2 hours a week. Oh gosh. Uh, this is absolutely fascinating. How is this message being uh, 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 distributed to the community? Is it predominantly to older persons? Because this isn't a topic that you hear much about discussed, but with the volume of falls that you have described, with the stats that you've raised, post 65, um, the numbers are so high. If we all get to that age, we're all going to take some falls.
Yeah.
Uh, is this something that the message is hard to get out? Is there any is this part of a do physios hold this message for that client group all the time? How do we get this out there? Is it a marketing campaign that's I haven't seen one, but I'm just wondering, you know, I'm always fascinated about what does research say, but my second point is always like, how does this get integrated? How does this get used? And obviously health providers will probably promote it, but often we just don't know about this, but it's so valuable. Like
Yeah.
if everyone heard this, and even if it was a 5% uptake, that would make tremendous change for people's lives. In reduction of falls, which could be a complete different trajectory in someone's life. How do you get this message out? What have you seen in the community?
Yeah. Yeah, and like as you say, like in preventing falls, but it even has like bigger effects, like it will improve people's quality of life, being able to live independent for longer. And as you're saying, like these these numbers are huge, and we urgently actually need action from government to see that this is actually a national health priority, and it is not considered a national health priority. And we are, as falls researchers, like we're advocating for this. We actually are urging people to, like politicians, to think about this problem and how it can be fixed. But we're not getting the traction. And like there's simple things that we can do. That type of message, like an awareness campaign, that is absolutely one that we would be interested in doing as well. Just uncomplicate the issue as well and make it something that people can talk about and also understand that there is something that they can do about it. Like it is preventable. Like we don't need to see it as an inevitable part of aging at all. Embedding these balance exercises that we've been talking about, taking some other simple steps in your home, like have a walk around in your home to make sure that there is no trip hazards out there. If you take lots of medications or if you have other kind of medical concerns, have a chat to your GP as well to see if there's something that you can do there to reduce your risk of falls. And it doesn't have to be complicated like this. But that kind of message is what we need to get out. And there's a huge economic case as well. Like we're actually trying to sell this as a business case to government as well, because it's the falls cost government, just falls in older people from 65 and up, $2.5 billion a year, every year. And that is going up because we have an aging population. Like our number of 85-year-olds will triple, and that's the group that actually will fall. At least, half of them will fall, and half of them will fall again in that same year. So, and it's not a problem that will go away. Like you can't just say, I'm not hearing it, and it will just it won't go away. It will get bigger and bigger. And as we have an aging population, and it is all over the world, and we don't get the traction. Like there's people talking about dementia all the time, and I'm not saying it's not an important problem. It totally is. But falls is actually a problem that will affect way more people and will actually be life-changing for many more people than dementia is. And we're not talking about it. And I don't know why. Not a sexy topic. I don't know.
This is massive, though, when I think about it, in terms of to go out and increase the lifespan of a quality of life, the lifespan of an independent life, the lifespan of more mobility. We are going to see more aging population, and to go out and increase that is really important, and it is baffling because this feels like an awareness campaign, which is probably one of the cheapest interventions you could do, would have a tremendous effect. I know for myself, once my parents, aged, my wife and I, we sat down and we had a conversation about, how do we look after our loved ones, and one of the things that we did is we invested, $600 watches, so that if they take a fall, at least somebody's notified. But that doesn't prevent the fall. That just says, well, if you have a fall and you hit your head and you're unconscious, which is probably highly unlikely, but it's the worst case scenario, there might be a watch that is triggered that makes a phone call. But that is, we should in actual fact be saying, let's put that $600 into getting educated, promoting this message, maybe group classes or some Tai Chi, whatever it might be. And maybe it's not one or the other by any stretch of the imagination, to be fair, but awareness. And interestingly, I'm becoming aware in this conversation that how important this is, and this is so preventable. Aging isn't, but in terms of, hey, we've got many good years ahead, and we can prevent a fall. Or at least the probability can dramatically drop. And we all know, you break a hip, or even a simple thing, you just get a sprained ankle, then you lose your confidence, then you get more depressed, then you go out and start to withdraw, then you start getting more anxious, then you're more homebound. Then you might seek medical attention less. And that might just be a sprained ankle because, a balance issue or something.
Yeah.
So I can see a little thing in an aging population can easily become a big thing. And that I'm not sure what you said, it was a 2.5 billion or whatever that number was, an astronomical number. I'm not sure whether that considers the sons and daughters and loved ones and
No.
spouses and the rest of who take time off to go look after their loved ones and the change that might have economically as well for many families. So
No, that's just a direct cost.
wow.
Yeah.
Wow. So it's much bigger than that, really.
It is,
I think
yeah.
the economic argument is the big one when we're trying to push the needle for government.
Yeah.
They're always interested in what's the cost.
Yeah, well, that's right. But like you say, an awareness campaign, and I do very much think it is important and it's something that we need to do, like absolutely a key piece of the puzzle. But there's more to it as well. Like we actually need to have the services available for people to know what to do because, we've been talking about, what the balance exercise is, but it's only when you really start doing it that you wonder, like, how do I do this?
Yeah.
And I've had chats with GPs as well who are saying, you know what, I actually did know where to refer my clients or my patients to. And then COVID hit and all these classes got cancelled.
Okay.
And they didn't start up again, or they did, but they moved somewhere else. And I just don't know where to refer my patients to. So, and there's actually there's just not enough services to actually help the amount of older people coming in, like because we do have an aging population. Like it's the most recent census is actually the first time that we have as many older people aged 65 and up as we have children aged 14 and younger. So we are actually shifting the dial now. So we have to start, and this is going to go, that gap is going to get bigger. Because we're having less children, but our baby boomers are getting older. So it's really about like educating, as you say, the awareness, but also giving people the solutions so that they know what to do. And it's with this in mind that we have actually, like as part of my research, we have developed an app that people can do these exercises in the comfort of their own home. So it's through technology. And so that they can actually, it grows with them. They can do an assessment at the beginning so they know where to start. And it just makes that barrier a lot kind of lower because it's just something that they can download. They can do it in the comfort of their own home at their own time. They can do it in these snacks if they like, or get it over and done with in one go. So but that's the kind of thing that we need to think about, like, this app will not be solution for everyone. That's never what I would say. But, we just need to have all these options available and just making sure that every single older person in Australia and globally knows what to do to prevent falls, to have that independent, fulfilling, active life that everyone deserves to get when they get older.
And I love the concept of having an assessment that you can do online through an app, because so much of this is about confidence, knowing what to do. It's fine for me to talk about it because I've got my balance in a fairly reasonable way, and I'm fairly ambitious and I'm excited. So to me, I'm immediately like, yeah, shut your eyes, let's get in on this, right? We're going to go charge ahead. I'm excitable in that way. But that's not the actual experience of most people when you're starting anything. Kind of like, me starting the gym now, I'm timid. Is this right? Should I be doing that? You're second guessing yourself. And to have something available that obviously is developed and designed by people using research who've got the experience, we can have a lot of confidence from that of saying, okay, I've graduated from this standing position. Now I can graduate to this standing position, and we can gamify it and so on and so forth. We can see achievements over time and so on. That's amazing. That's amazing. Is that an app that's presently available? And I'm asking about one that is, has that scientific rigor, or is this, an online based thing? Is it on your phone? Is it on computer? Where can we find that?
Yeah, so at the moment it's still in the research space, but we hope from next year, early next year actually, to have it available on the App Store. And it is fully backed up by research. So we've done multiple clinical trials, and that is like to do a clinical trial for falls, like it should be randomized so that you have like a group of people not doing that program and then a group of people following that program, and they're just having a look at the difference. You need about 500 people in a trial to be able to actually show whether it's conclusive. And we've done 2 big trials like this, one in a lower risk group of people, because the first time I was a bit terrified to kind of get people doing these challenging exercise programs. So we decided on a
It'll be a long
lower risk.
waiver on that one.
Yeah, I know. But we asked people to do it for 2 years. And we actually don't follow people up. So we just kind of explain how to do it. And then it kind of has a lot of like behavioral change techniques in there, like to kind of keep them engaged and motivated. And in that trial of low risk people, we saw that we could reduce injuries over that 2-year period by 20%. So that's massive, right? Like in a low risk group of people. There was 70 and up though. So we did kind of have a higher age bracket, but like people who were generally quite well. And the most exciting thing actually, Nesh, was that our compliance or adherence to the program was super high. So we had at 6 months, we had 80% of our people still using the app at that recommended dose. And at 2 years, and without us following up, like people are just using it, but we can see in the back end how much they use it. We still had 52%, so over half, using it at that recommended dose. And that's why we knew we've got something that people like doing, and it is applicable.
This is like probably the young people's, the game of Fortnite status. But for the over 70s, that's incredible. It says to me, and I'm going to guess here, it says to me 2 things. My first one is obviously it's engaging, and there's that benefit being received, and so someone wouldn't do it if they didn't continue to receive that. But I also think maybe someone of that age group, they're engaging in that because there's a high motivation, there's a compliance around that, because they're wanting to get something out of it. This becomes something that, the motivation for change is already there if you're getting involved. Because older people, if you don't want to do it, you just don't do it. You say, not do it. But if you do engage, that high retention of users is phenomenal. It's excellent.
Yeah, and I actually really dedicate it to our consumers that we actually have this high level of adherence, because we developed Standing Tall. That's the name of the app. With older people. Standing Tall. Yeah.
Oh, Standing Tall.
Yeah, Standing Tall.
Yes. And is it stand, and that's how it will be released as well. It'll be standing tall, as in like with your shoulders back, sort of standing.
Yeah, standing tall. Yes. So but we developed it with older people for older people. So this goes back to 2013, 2014. So it's kind of goes back quite a while that we started doing this work. And the iPad was out there, but it was still very uncommon for people to have one, especially in the older generation.
Yes.
But we actually, we designed it with them. So we kind of gave prototypes. We decided on font and colors together, and also how it should be pictured. And we took all the kind of advice that they had for us, on board. One that I like to give as an example, just to kind of give the extent of what we kind of went through in our co-design, is that, in many apps, you have a back button, it's somewhere. at the top. But one of the things that they said back, I don't know where it goes back to. Like sometimes it goes back to the previous screen, and other times it goes back to the home screen, and other times it does this. And then I thought, that's so right.
Yeah.
So then instead of just saying back or just having the arrow, we actually say where it goes back to. So, we're just clear. We're not condescending. We're just clear.
Yeah.
And that's how we've developed the app. And we've had never any issues with usability. Like we had people joining our trials who have absolutely no technological experience, and we would be giving them an iPad and show them how to use it. And we would get questions on other apps
Yeah.
or how to get an email or something, but never on our standing tall app. So, and I do think that's the key, that you actually, we're not designing this for us who are used to using technology these days, but we're designing it for a group that haven't used technology as part of their work life or, so we just need to keep that in mind. And I do think that's the key. And also keeping in mind that behavioral change strategies are actually very different for a teenager who might be playing Fortnite, as you were saying, to an older person, where we're actually really more trying to get into a habit formation, like a good habit, like just kind of making sure that it becomes so much part of your routine that if you don't do it, you actually feel guilty.
Yes.
So that's kind of what we're trying to aim for. And then as part of our trials, we have people who who go on a cruise and they take it with them because it's an iPad and they do their exercises on the cruise boat. So adds a bit of challenge with the wobble.
This is absolutely remarkable. I'm so excited to follow up on the Standing Tall app or program when it's released and have a look at it myself and be able to promote it to those around me. I'm definitely going to start with my parents. This idea of living with independence, living with confidence for longer.
Yeah.
All the things that come out of that is remarkable, and the fact that it's kind of available to us right now. As you say, next time you make a cup of tea, stand on one leg, or
That's right.
one in front of the other and stand for a moment. There's so many ways that this could be achieved, and the results are phenomenal, because the other side is you do take a fall, and even if you don't hurt yourself, you could hurt your confidence, which has a whole domino effect as well that we all know of. So that's fantastic. When did you say that is likely? I know that it's obviously hard to predict, but when is that likely to be released, or you're hoping for that release date?
I think I'll say April 2025.
Yeah, lovely.
That should be a safe time.
Excellent. And in the meantime, obviously, there's a little bit of time between now and there's several months. Some might listen to this podcast at that time or later, which is great, and it'll be available. But in the meantime, if anyone would like to find out more, what are some good resources, any good websites, any journal articles that we can continue that conversation with for listeners?
Yeah, absolutely. I will share a few good websites with you that you can share with your listeners as
Right.
well. There's different ones in different states, but there are also good resources that actually show some good exercises that you can start with. There's always the option as well to join a class. Tai Chi is actually a really good one if that can be challenging, for the majority of the people. But that's not available to everyone around. But there might be other classes as well. The main thing is that it needs to challenge your balance. So, there's a bit of a boom of seated yoga. It's nothing wrong with it. It might be very good, but it's it will depend on how they deliver it, whether it will actually challenge your balance. So just kind of really have a think about, whether you feel like your balance is challenged, and, it might be enjoyable to do it, and you should absolutely do other exercises as well. But if you want to do falls prevention, it needs to challenge your balance. That's the key thing.
And I think one of the lovely things about putting these two worlds together is you could do both at the same time. You could go out and do some strength work, or different types of exercise while you're also going out and building your balance, which is fantastic. You just got to think about it in using these principles and find something that's going to be challenging for you. Maybe what you can do, Kim, as well, is if you provide us with some of those links, we can put them onto our show notes so people can then find it on neshnikolic.com on this episode, and just go to the show notes and we can provide all of those links. So you can provide them afterwards, and we'll share them around. Kim, thank you so much. Thank you so much. You're amazing. I really appreciate all your knowledge and working in this area, and I hope that this conversation can be, not specific. This podcast can promote it, everywhere, but that there is government funding that promotes this message, that has this conversation. As a matter of fact, a global conversation. People all around the world who are, in that space right now. I hope to be one of those one day if I'm privileged enough to get there. And this is important that we, start. And the truth be told, I'm already there. I can see that my body is beginning to not provide me with the same level of balance. And for all sorts of reasons, whether it's distraction, whether it's, from a physical side, whether it's cognitive load, many things. So, this has really been fascinating, and I've learned so much. Who would have thought, we're talking about, falls. But yeah, I wish we had more time.
Yeah. Thank you, Nesh. Yeah. And you can start practicing on your own balance.
Thanks, Kim. All the best.
Thank you very much. It was a pleasure.